Hi everyone, in today's video I'll cover a ranged rogue that uses both cold and shadow imbuements together. This hybrid build has a lot of potential by multiplying your damage with chilling and freezing effects, and inflicting area of effect damage with shadow imbuement for very high AOE clears using the Icy Alchemist aspect. In previous videos, I've covered separate shadow and cold ranged rogue builds. Do check those build videos out to get a good idea of their strengths and weaknesses, and how these builds can then meld together to create a build that has the best of both worlds. This hybrid build is the build I'm most excited about, and will be rolling as my first character once Diablo 4 goes live. So with that out of the way, for this build, the first skill we'll get is Forceful Arrow. Forceful Arrow shoots a straight arrow free of cost, with every third arrow fired also applying a vulnerable debuff on enemies, which lasts for 2 seconds. Vulnerable enemies receive 20% more damage, which can be further boosted by items, skills, and Paragon. The skill is a perfect choice for bosses or leftover enemies to finish off for this reason, and will also be the skill of choice for getting those combo points later on. Get 2 points into this skill to unlock the core skills. For core skills, we will get Penetrating Shot. Penetrating Shot shoots a high powered shot in a straight line, hitting multiple enemies. Penetrating Shot is a skill of choice for leveling, as it can kill groups of mobs fairly quickly, and in the early stages of the game, elites don't take that much longer to kill anyway. We will eventually get Rapid Fire, but for now, get your next 4 skill points into Penetrating Shot, Enhanced Penetrating Shot, and Improved Penetrating Shot. Enhanced Penetrating Shot increases your Penetrating Shot damage by 10% for each enemy it pierces. An Improved Penetrating Shot increases your crit chance of your next Penetrating Shot by 20% if the previous one hits 3 or more enemies. Getting these skills should unlock your Agility skills. For your Agility skills, get yourself Dash. Dash makes your rogue dash forward, hitting enemies along the dashed path. Dash is most useful for its general mobility, which would be used in the open world and in dungeons to move about faster and for repositioning yourself out of danger. This is a must-have skill, but just 1 point in this is fine. After Dash, continue to max out your Penetrating Shot skill, and then get 1 point into Rapid Fire. At this point, start using Rapid Fire for elites and bosses, but still use Penetrating Shot for everything else. This should then unlock your Subterfuge skills. For your Subterfuge skills, get your next 3 points across Dark Shroud, Enhanced Dark Shroud, and Subverting Dark Shroud. Dark Shroud summons 5 shadows that orbit your rogue, each reducing the damage that you take by 8%, for a total of 40% across the 5 shadows. Each time you get hit, 1 shadow gets consumed and thereby increases the damage that you receive from any subsequent attacks thereafter. Enhanced Dark Shroud gives Dark Shroud a 10% chance that one of your shadows do not disappear when you get hit. And Subverting Dark Shroud gives you 4% movement speed per active shadow that you have. This is handy to increase your movement speed to help progress through the game faster. After getting those 3 points into Dark Shroud, get 1 point into Enhanced Rapid Fire and then 1 more point into Rapid Fire. Enhanced Rapid Fire adds 5% more crit chance for each of your successive arrows, with the 5th arrow adding an extra 25% crit chance. This should now unlock your Imbuement skills. Just before we get into Imbuments, if you're level 15, you should be able to complete the part of the quest line to earn a combo point specialization for your rogue. Make sure you get combo points before moving on too far. Combo points will be very useful going forward to give your rogue spikes in damage output with your core skill attacks. For Rapid Fire, combo points not only increases the damage of each arrow, but also the number of arrows shot from 5 to 8, and increases the crit chance of the 8th arrow by an extra 40%. This is a huge buff for your single target damage, increasing the combined rapid fire damage from 120% across 5 arrows to 268.8% across 8 arrows, with arrows 6, 7 and 8 having 30, 35 and 40% extra crit chance on top of that. For your imbuement skills, we'll spec into a full shadow imbuement build initially. Get 3 points across Shadow Imbuement, Enhanced Shadow Imbuement, and Blended Shadow Imbuement. Shadow Imbuement is your main area of effect skill that infects enemies with shadow damage. When infected enemies die, they explode and deal shadow damage to all nearby enemies. This can cause a large chain reaction to explode multiple enemies with one single attack, and is by far the best area of effect imbuement for the rogue. Enhanced Shadow Imbuement increases your crit chance versus injured enemies that are infected with shadow by 15%. And Blended Shadow Imbuement makes Shadow Imbuement's explosions apply vulnerable to all enemies hit, increasing the chance of those chain reactions to happen. After that, get 1 point into Shadow Crash and 1 point into Consuming Shadows. Shadow Crash grants a chance to stun enemies with shadow damage, but we're mainly using this skill point to unlock Consuming Shadows. Consuming Shadows restores 10 energy every time an enemy is killed from your shadow damage. So if you blow up a pack of enemies from Shadow Imbuement, then your energy is pretty much filled right up again. After this, get 1 point into Exploit. Exploit increases your damage by 6% per rank versus healthy and injured enemies, where healthy enemies have more than 80% life and injured enemies have less than 35% life. This is useful for increasing your general damage against enemies and should work for your basic skills, core skills, and shadow imbuement. We'll max this passive out eventually, but for now just put 1 skill point into this skill. And then get 1 more point into Rapid Fire. For your ultimate skills, pick up Adrenaline Rush first to unlock Haste. Haste grants your rogue 5% movement speed when the rogue's energy is above 50% or 5% attack speed if the rogue's energy is below 50%. This is a good pickup to have increased movement speed or attack speed based on when those bonuses are needed the most. After that, pick up Shadow Clone. Shadow Clone does 60% of your damage that you deal, which adds a huge damage spike to your kit. This will be particularly good for boss encounters, together with Forceful Arrow and Rapid Fire to take down bosses quickly. For the following 2 skill points into Shadow Clone after that, Prime Shadow Clone grants you Unstoppable every time you cast a Shadow Clone, and Supreme Shadow Clone increases your Shadow Clone damage from 60 to 80%. At this point, you'll have more skills than what you can fit in your skill bar. I would make your Rapid Fire skill a backup skill for bosses only by swapping Penetrating Shot with Rapid Fire for boss encounters and switching back afterwards. After Shadow Clone, get 3 more points into Shadow Imbuement to boost your Shadow Imbuement's overall damage. This should unlock your key passive skills, which I would pick up Precision. With Precision, every time you critical strike with a marksman skill like Penetrating Shot and Rapid Fire, you'll gain 1 stack of Precision. Each stack of Precision grants you 4% more crit damage. After accumulating 5 stacks of Precision, your next marksman attack will be a guaranteed crit and do 40% more crit damage. This is going to further improve your damage, especially with skills such as Penetrating Shot and Rapid Fire that have improved crit chance that can trigger this passive more often. The other key passive called Victimize is not needed for this build, as Shadow Imbuement should provide us with all the AOE that we'll ever need. Beyond here, this is where we'll start speccing into Cold. We'll get 1 point into Cold Imbuement and then 3 points into Frigid Finesse. Cold Imbuement will apply chill damage to enemies hit by your Cold Imbued skills. Together with 3 points into Frigid Finesse, your attacks will deal 15% more damage to the enemies that you've chilled previously with Cold Imbuement. Now with Cold Imbuement and Shadow Imbuement, you have an AoE damage source and a way to amplify that damage with Chill to help set off those Shadow Explosions quicker. At this point, you can respec out a Dark Shroud for Cold Imbuement by getting 3 additional skill points into Cold Imbuement to increase that Chill potency to freeze enemies quicker and with less attacks. This will in turn mean that you will more easily get that additional damage versus frozen enemies. You might feel a little naked without Dark Shroud at this point, but with the extra damage from your Cold Imbuement, you should still have groups of enemies under control. Still, look out for one of these 2 aspects that give you Dark Shroud. Enshrouding aspect, which gives you a Dark Shroud shadow every 3 seconds while standing still. An Umbrous aspect, which gives you a Dark Shroud shadow on lucky hit. Once you get either of these aspects, you can spec into Dark Shroud again and have your Dark Shroud shadows accumulate from your aspects rather than manually casting Dark Shroud from your skill bar. From here, do look out for the following 2 legendary aspects to help spread Cold and Shadow Imbuements. Aspect of Shared Misery and Trickshot aspect. Both of these aspects can be accessed from your Codex of Power once you've earned them, or can be gambled for by gambling for gloves from the Purveyor of Curiosities. After getting a few points into Cold Imbuement, pick up Enhanced Cold Imbuement and Mixed Cold Imbuement. Enhanced Cold Imbuement will help apply vulnerable damage periodically and will also unlock Mixed Cold Imbuement. And Mixed Cold Imbuement adds damage versus chilled and frozen enemies when using Cold Imbued skills. With both Shadow and Cold Imbuements now, your attack loop should look something like this. Cast Cold Imbuement, get 3 combo points, cast Penetrating Shot rounds to chill enemies with Cold Imbuement. Chilling enemies with these attacks will make your upcoming Shadow Imbuement attacks much stronger. So then cast Shadow Imbuement, get 3 combo points, cast Penetrating Shot into the same group of enemies, get 3 combo points again, cast Penetrating Shot into the same group of enemies again. This should make quick work of mobs that you encounter in dungeons and in the open world. Finishing off your skill tree, do pick up as many of the damage and lucky hit boosting passives as possible. Specifically, I would pick up the following additional skills in order. Max out Innovation, then Shadow and Cold Imbuements, then 1 point into Aftermath for energy recovery, 1 point into Alchemist Fortune for extra lucky hit, then max out Exploit, 1 point into Advanced Rapid Fire as well as maxing Rapid Fire and Precision Imbuement. For legendary aspects, aside from the ones I mentioned earlier, you want to stack as many damage and attack speed based aspects as you can, and last but definitely not least, while it's not strictly required for this build, the Icy Alchemist aspect is a legendary aspect that improves both the playability and fantasy of this build. This aspect grants you a lucky hit chance to trigger a cold explosion with your Shadow Imbuement attacks, chilling and damaging groups of enemies while applying Shadow Imbuement on them at the same time. Unfortunately, this aspect cannot be collected into your Codex of Power, but this aspect will fit this particular hybrid build so nicely once you do find that aspect. At this point, you may have excessive amounts of chill sources and potency in your build that you may consider scaling down your Cold Imbuement skill in favour of picking up Weapon Mastery for increased damage. This is one of the many optimizations you can make on your build at this stage, and is something that you should experiment with and see what works for you. For Paragon boards, make sure you pick up these boards for your first 3 boards. Cheap Shot for that absurd amount of damage versus crowd controlled enemies and damage reduction versus slowed enemies. Pick up the legendary node for this board as well. Eldritch's Bounty for boosting your cold imbuements and imbued skill damage. Also pick up the imbuement skill cooldown reduction nodes here where you can. Pick up the legendary node for this board as well. And Exploit Weakness for boosting your vulnerable damage. Pick up the legendary node for this board as well. For fighting bosses, switch Penetrating Shot over to Rapid Fire and use Cold Imbuement to apply Stagger and Vulnerable on the boss. You should have fairly reliable vulnerable uptime, crit chance and crit damage, as well as Rapid Fire with combo points. But it's important to get the attack loop correct to maximize your damage output on the boss. Specifically, your attack loop should look like this. Cast Shadow Clone, cast Cold Imbuement, get 3 combo points, evade, cast Rapid Fire, get 3 combo points, cast Rapid Fire again, making sure that we cast the 2 Rapid Fire volleys as close to each other as possible. And then while Cold Imbuement is on cooldown, switch to using Shadow Imbuement for some slight added damage and 15% extra crit chance when the boss eventually becomes injured. Shadow Imbuement here is potentially useful for taking out any of the adds that the boss summons during the fight as well. And so there you go guys, this is how to roll with a hybrid Shadow and Cold Range Rogue build. Once again, I'll be rolling with this build come Diablo 4 launch, as this build does have the best of both worlds with great AoE damage and high damage multipliers and will be a whole lot of fun. Anyway, if you've got any questions or comments about this build, please shout out in the comments below. In my next few videos, I'll cover some more build ideas and cover some more game mechanic type stuff for Diablo 4. So do hit that like button and subscribe to this channel if you're interested in looking out for that and more Diablo 2 and Diablo 4 content. Until then, stay safe everyone. I hope you're looking forward to Diablo 4's launch as much as I am. See you guys in the next video.